Alrighty, this is Dima again with episode number 4, and we got Mike Goldenstein. Biblical Contractor is a channel, podcast, whatever you want to call it, where we talk Bible with contracting world. It's a simple way to describe what we do here. Talk Bible, talk Jesus, unashamedly, with the contracting world, especially with people who've been in the faith for some time. Not because the newbies are not important, it's just because the oldies are usually a little bit more wise and experienced, and they've been through a few things. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. I have a cool guest today, Mike Goldenstein. Mike, thank you for joining today.
Yeah, it's an honor. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, yeah. Honor is mine. You've been pretty famous in the roofing world, from what I'm seeing, especially with your witty humor that just stood out to me from the very beginning. I appreciate it. I love it, but I don't know too much about your faith, and that's why I think that's going to be very encouraging, both for me, but also to those who know you from the business side of things, but maybe don't know you as much from the faith, from the personal, from the more kind of core of who you are. And I'm excited about this.
Yeah, that's exciting. And one of the things that it'll probably put a lot of pieces together. I had somebody at a conference a couple of months ago that said that did know my background. So my background is, I'll go over really quickly.
Yeah.
I became a Christian. Was raised in a Christian home. Really became my identity about my junior year of high school,
Mm.
uh, back in the early '90s. I went to a Christian college. I was a Christian education major. I became a youth pastor, and
Oh,
in
wow.
fact, my favorite was about 6 years as a junior high, middle school youth pastor, which
Man, that makes so much
goes.
sense now.
Same. That's exactly what happened. I was at an event and they're like, okay, so you're still a sixth grade middle school youth pastor. You're just doing it
Right.
in the roofing industry. And so,
You're
yeah, if
stuck.
anybody,
It's I think there's a saying, once youth pastor, forever youth pastor, so that makes total sense now, where that, just fun and joy and just jokes and just that I would say even childlike kind of attitude in a good sense comes through sometimes. So that's awesome.
yeah, but then at the same time, though, every time you're doing that, like it's just not always good, fun, and humorous. Like there is a
Right.
strategy behind it, and we take that very seriously where I'm at. And even when I was before this, when I was at GAF, like I do some crazy, funny, stupid stuff, but a, a, a there's always a
That
reason behind it.
thought
There's
process,
usually a
for sure.
strategy and a thought
For
process.
sure.
Yeah. So hopefully
Yeah.
that's always a
Yeah,
good.
you don't just undress and put some kind of clothes on you, right? Like you've done that type of stuff. Like you would wear some crazy costumes and do some crazy funny things, but you put thoughts into that. So I would love to hear about that a little bit more. But if you want, let's start with this question. And I asked that question a few of the previous guests. When I say the phrase biblical contractor, what comes to your mind?
So it is one that holds the scriptures in a high regard as a guidebook to your life.
Mhm.
Specifically for me, and I'll be very honest as to what really guides me. My mission statement, if you will, is
Yeah.
found in Micah 6:8. And
Mhm.
it's probably the one piece that is the unsolvable mystery of humanity. It's the
Mm.
ability um, to do justly or do
Mm.
rightly, follow the rules. There are some rules and they're good rules and they're there to
Yeah.
benefit you, right? So you want to do justly, to love mercy,
Yeah.
which is kind of the flip side of that, right? So as you're doing the things that God has laid out for you to do and following his purpose, where can you and really focus on loving mercy? And
Mm.
there's so many things in that. Why are you doing justly, but you're loving mercy? And then there's that tension between those two things that is kind of what I say is bringing about the complexity of humanity. And the only way that you're even become close to solving it is by walking humbly with your God, which is the third part of that verse. And so that when you do want to see the core of my being, is really found in the complexities of that verse,
Mm.
and walking through. So when I hear biblical contractor, it's somebody who can view their life through the pages of scripture.
I love it. I love it. It's really really good description. So I got Micah 6:8, like you said. Uh, right? I think it's, yep, 6:8. So that's right here, right?
Yep.
He has told you, man, what is good, and what does Yahweh or Lord require of you, but to do justice and to loving kindness and to walk humbly with your God. So these these three particular things, right? Justice, loving kindness, or mercy, right, and humility. Those, you would say, are the kind of pillars of your Christian life, that, or you try to make them.
Yeah, that is. And
Hmm.
again, when you're saying, and if you think about when it was that God was talking to the Jewish people at this time.
Yeah.
You're in the pages of the Old Testament. They are getting all wrapped up in the ritualistic sacrificial um laws of the Old Testament and the Septuagint, and then you're leading them, into this place where, and again, people talk about this differently, and I don't know how deep you want to go into this, but when you open up the chapters of the New Testament, they say, "Oh, no, no, no,
Right.
this is all new." It's good, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to remember that
No.
when God is
Yeah.
pleading with the Israelites and saying, "It,
Yeah.
I don't, I deserve mercy, not your sacrifice." Like,
For
wait, hold
sure.
on. We've been
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
sacrifice the whole Old Testament. Now you're saying all of a sudden,
Right.
and
Right.
to me, God does not change from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and the more you spend time in the Old Testament, you'll kind of
Yeah.
see that.
I love it.
But as for me as a Christian, the only way I can solve that tension between doing rightly and loving mercy is to walk humbly. It is a daily walk with
Yeah.
God, because without that, you're going to
Right.
inevitably fall off one side of the road or the other.
Right. Right. There's always dangers. It's like you picking and choosing the characteristics of God that you love most, right? And you will most likely end up in heresy if you do that. Like, if God is too loving, you're going to end up in the heresy. If God is too just and too holy, and you don't mention other things, you will end up in other heresy. So you have to take it all and not pick and choose. Same here. Those three things.
Yeah, I always called it the character of God versus the caricature of God. And if you ever
Right.
watch a caricature, you see, and I would pull out my youth pastor days, I'd pull out all these pictures and I'd say, "Who is this?" And you've got this guy with great big ears and big mouth, and everybody
Yeah.
says, "Oh, that's Barack Obama," and that's Michael Jordan, and that's like, they're all recognizable, right? That's the
Yeah.
whole point. But certain features are distorted,
Yeah.
and so many times we look at God with the same thing. We understand the caricature of God based on our experiences or on our working knowledge of it, but we don't truly know the character of
Yeah.
God until we really dive in to the pages of the
So
Bible.
true. And I think what you said is so important, because if you pick and choose what you read in the Bible, you're left with a very distorted picture of who God is, because no one book describes God in his fullness. And studying the Old Testament is crucial to even understanding the New Testament. If you don't understand the Old Testament, you will never understand the New Testament. I'm definitely not one of those supersessionists who think church replaced Israel, and Israel has nothing to do, and Old Testament has nothing to do with us today. It's absolutely untrue, because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if you don't know Him from the Old Testament, you're missing out so much. You will never understand the New Testament. You will never understand the New Testament. It will not make sense. You're going to cherry pick what the verses that you like, and you will leave out the hard ones that are sometimes even harsher than in the Old Testament. And you're like, okay, but it's only when you kind of come to God with nothing, and you're like, I want to know who you are, first of all, before I come up with the idea of who you should be. So tell me who you are, like Moses. Tell me your name. Who are you? And God is like telling him things that are crucial about him, about his character, both loving kindness, but also holiness, like making sure that Moses understands that God is complex. He's not like us. That's awesome. I've spent many years in youth ministry myself. Leading a youth group, high schoolers, and middle school, and now I have my own kind of youth ministry for life. With all the kids that God gave us. So I totally understand. And even like every evening, at our home, we try to do Bible study. It's literally like me doing like preaching in a very very real sense, explaining to them the Bible, making sure they understand the application, helping them with that. And I think somebody told me after after I was invited to be a preacher at a youth camp. I remember when I was like 20 or 19, and they invited me to kind of preach, and that's the first time when I realized that maybe that's what God wants me to do. At some point, when everything else balances out with my life and character. But kids started to kind of they for the first time, some kids understood the holiness of God part. And one of my pastors at that time, he told me, hey, that's a very good sign that if kids can understand your preaching, that means you understand your preaching and everyone else can understand your preaching. Because if kids don't understand what you're saying, most likely you don't understand what you're saying, and adults for sure don't understand what you're saying. So I think it's a great test for anyone who is aspiring to be a teacher or preacher, or just someone who is faithful believer, to practice their teaching and preaching on the kids first, to make sure they actually understand you. Because if you cannot simplify things, you don't probably understand them yourself.
I've never heard that, and that's an interesting take on things. And and I do think that there's a reason why Jesus talks about that as um, the children of the world are the ones that we're asked to have a childlike faith, and I think they are the ones that are more moldable and eager and uh, understand and see and recognize wonder
Right.
much more than we do as an adult too. So there's an
Right.
ability to experience God differently as a child that I do think, particularly in America, I think is harder and harder to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Well, Mike, you are the face of Roofle, so contractors know you as this guy who is both funny but also very useful to the roofing companies with the quoting, with the form, with the whole kind of system of immediate quotes right from your website. So I think most people know that part of you. Tell us a little bit about the part that people probably don't know as much about you. How did God find you? How did you respond to God's call to follow Him?
Yeah, that's a great question, and what I've kind of come together to say is that I do kind of feel like I'm a mutt when it comes to denominations, my
Mm,
upbringing. I come from a history. I was adopted as a kid and
wow.
as an infant. And my parents were always very open to letting me know that I was adopted, and I knew what that meant even as young as kindergarten and before. And then my family growing up, my adopted family, there are a lot of Lutheran pastors, and so we were
Mm,
kind of Lutheran for a while, and then all of a sudden, my parents went through this re-identification process and started going to a Pentecostal. So we went from Lutheran to Pentecostal, and then some
quite a
stuff came
quite a
up with
jump.
my. That's quite a jump, right?
You're right.
So I was baptized as an infant. I went to confirmation. In fact, we started going to this Pentecostal church, and we came back to the Lutheran church so I could get confirmed, only to go back to the Pentecostal because again, there were family pressures to do the right thing, and right.
Everything,
And
yeah.
so so much of this stuff is fooling around in my head. And then, my brother ran through a really rough spot and ended up moving out. I mean, he ran away from home and moved out as a sophomore in
Mm,
high school. I was a freshman, and then found out, he when he came back for a spell, we went to a different church. It was like it was neither of those, and so
wow.
all of these things. By the time I was a junior, senior, I really felt like my faith was rooted in my faith. It wasn't my parents' faith. It wasn't my brothers. It wasn't, I
Mm,
just it wasn't. wasn't really engaged with denominations. I was engaged with Jesus Christ. And
That's awesome.
when I made the decision to get baptized, immersed, that was a decision, and there was for good reason. And I did that as
Hmm.
a junior in high school, and then went
Hmm. So you
to
ended
Air
up being a
University.
Baptist, basically.
Well, like I said, I've been Baptist General Conference, I've been Evangelical Free, I've been
Right,
Church
right,
of
right.
God, Church of Christ. I've been in a lot of them, and guess what?
Wow.
I'm back at a Lutheran church. So
Oh, you
that's
are
for oh, for
interesting.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
By the way, what's the
Um,
Hebrew word on your hat? I missed that.
Yahweh. That's
Yahweh.
Yahweh
Okay, that's
in
right.
Hebrew.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and again, so there's so many complexities, and really why it's part of why I tell that story is that when we bring ourselves to religion, we inevitably start redefining religion.
Hmm.
And some people are offended by that, and some people embrace that. Because if
Hmm.
you think about it, even in first century Judaism, when Jesus was walking the earth, what was he doing? At first, he went and he cleansed the temple. That was the Sadducees, who were kind of the liberal, socially uh, uh, liberal with their theology. And so
Yeah.
he kind of set the stage right early
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And then what did he do? He went to the religious conservatives. If you think about
Right.
it,
Pharisees. Yeah.
and I don't,
Hmm.
do you ever think about that? If you'd have gone back in first century Judaism, you showed up, you woke up tomorrow not knowing the New Testament,
Yeah.
you probably would have been very sympathetic to the Pharisees. Like they had
Oh
not
yeah.
been exposed
One hundred
as
percent. 100%.
the spiritually
They
dead.
would be the right. They would be the modern
Yeah,
right.
yeah, for sure.
So for sure, like some would say radical right, but for sure on the right side, and I would be more leaning towards that for absolutely.
Yeah. So as we're going through college and really kind of understanding, and I did, I take, I have a fascination with the Bible. I'm fascinated with the context of it, the history, the politics, um, the ethics, the whole thing. And so I have taken 2 study tours to Israel, spent a lot of time there.
Wow,
Really
that's
looking
awesome.
forward to another one. I've been kind of on this waiting list because it
Hmm.
started at COVID and then wars and stuff. And the
Yeah.
people that I typically go to, we just haven't been able to go back for about 5 years now. I
Mm,
went with my mom one time. I went with my son one time, and it's kind of been
yeah.
the desire is to take each of one of my kids to Israel because it
Yeah.
does bring a different context to
Hmm.
studying the scripture. Takes it outside of that
Hmm.
fairy tale land. Can I be so bold to
Hmm.
say, like, we kind of read it and go, "Oh, this is just a bunch of magic tricks and fancy stories." And when you start walking those lands and seeing the context and seeing the cities, and the ruins and all the things that the archaeologists are bringing up, you start seeing the Bible in the history book that it is, with the characters that actually lived, and it opens up a whole different understanding to the Bible. And I would say if there's anything that has impacted my faith walk,
Yeah.
it was visiting Israel.
Israel.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm gonna finish this up because yeah. So I
You
grew
got
up.
a Jewish last name, I think. Correct.
It's German.
German. Okay.
Goldenstein. If it didn't have the en, it'd be much more Jewish. Goldstein is very Jewish.
Goldstein. Yeah.
Goldenstein
Yeah.
is more German.
All right. Right.
But I do. But I grew up on a hog farm in Iowa, so for a lot of my friends, they call me their favorite Jewish pig farmer,
Yeah.
which is
I
I hope
want
is
to take
funny.
this. I want to take this opportunity though, because you seem to to love both the Old Testament, but also you understand the Hebrew culture, and you have a passion for the Jews. There is a rising anti-Semitism right now, and if you just to take a detour because it's so relevant, what would what are your thoughts right now as far as it seems like it's a totally on one hand, there's some reason to be suspicious about things. And I don't want to get into like these wild theories behind like murder of Charlie Kirk, but in general, there is like lack of trust to Israel government. But with that, a lot of times you go way too far, and you start just saying things that are anti-Semitic in essence. So what is your kind of? I know it's a little bit risky to say that, but I think you might provide some balanced approach, or how do you deal with that yourself at the very least? Where do you stand?
So I remember in middle school when we were learning about nations and religions, and it always came out that Jewish or Judaism is both a people and a religion.
Mm,
And I believe that that has, in those days, I didn't really, it didn't make like crazy fact, right? I mean, what does that actually mean? Today, though, I think that's really where this is rooted in the confusion of things. Like, is it a religion? Is it a
right.
people? And what is the
Is it a
difference
nation? Is
between
it a
that?
government? Like, what is it? Yeah.
Is it a nation? Is it a government? And what does and does not God call his people?
Right.
And the harsh reality, one of the hardest parts. Okay, it's a couple of two stories, if you will.
Hmm.
When I was in Israel, we were on the stairs to the Temple Mount, which is where the temple was, and which, if you know, the temple is controlled by Muslims today. But tourism is
Yeah.
very important, so they are more than happy to let us,
Yeah.
Jewish descent, be up there. And the guard was there, and we were talking about the second coming with the guard, like, how exciting is it going to be the day that Jesus comes? Actually, we didn't say that. We said, how great would the day be when the temple is
Messiah. Yeah.
restored
Mm,
and the Messiah comes?
yeah.
And the response was this beautiful young lady with an M16 pats her guns and says, this is the only Messiah we're ever going to need.
Mm, hmm.
So when we're talking about God's ordaining purposes for his people, who are those people? And if those people have, and again, I don't want to put the entire
Yeah.
nation of Israel on this one person,
Right. Right.
but you have to acknowledge that for the most part, a significant part of the nation of Israel has gone secular. I mean,
Oh
it
yeah.
it it just
Yeah.
has. So there is a complexity with all that, and
Yeah.
um, and so I got a second story. Uh, when we were going in the old city of Jerusalem, and you know me, I'm just not very much of a rule follower. You can tell me to stay on the path, and I'll venture off. And I ended up venturing off into a part of town that was a little bit different, and ended up at knocked on the door, walked in this little shop, and because it had all these ornaments and robes and different things, and I was intrigued by it, and started talking to the gentleman there, and he believed that he was in the order of Cohen, which is the priestly lineage of the Messiah, and so that he believed that once the temple was restored, that his family, and he was preparing for the day that he would be restored as a priest in the temple. And I'm just going nuts. I'm like, that is the coolest thing ever. And asking a bunch of stories, and asking about, how does this going to work, and how's this, and where do you think it's going to be
Hmm.
laid out, and how, just the practicality of it. And but at the end of the day, when I was kind of getting excited about this stuff, like, what are you most excited about? Like, and I'm thinking in terms of the pathway that with our conversation to be going, is this connection to the Almighty
Hmm.
that's going to be restored, and how exciting is that going to be? And when I was getting to that part of the conversation, and I said, what's it going to be like? And he says, well, you have to understand, there's about 70% of the Old Testament law that we're unable to fulfill right today.
Mm,
I'm like,
hmm.
I mean, I wanted to say, who cares about that 70% of the rituals? Like, I'm talking about a relationship with the Almighty God. It's going to be
Yeah. Yeah.
restored. We're going to be, in the temple.
Yeah.
And, he's like, well, I mean, you think about the number of sacrifices we can't make today, and we can't do this one, and we can't do this. And, there's so many things. And so
Yeah.
there's a part of me that grieves, that there is this
Yeah,
disconnect. It feels like
for
there's this
sure.
disconnect, but at the same time,
Hmm.
social media has gotten us dumber, right? I mean, we just have
Yeah.
to, we thought that having all of this access to information was going to make us smarter and wiser,
Hmm.
and I believe it's kind of the opposite. And we have to look at events like the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and we need to have the freedom to be able to ask hard questions,
Hmm. Hmm.
and we have to, but we also have to have the character of the people as well, not the caricature of the people. So
Right.
I'm not going to say, oh, those Jews do this or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
those Jews do that. Like, but if there's some things that we need to
Yeah.
crystallize this vision of what's actually going on in the world today. We should have the freedom to be able to do that without being automatically labeled anti-Semitic. Does that make
Right.
sense? And
Right.
and
No, absolutely.
that's a hard way to say it.
Absolutely. I mean, you can spend hours talking about this, but I agree with you. It's very important to distinguish um, the government and the people, and what Bible calls Israel. It doesn't refer to the current government necessarily, and historically and even biblically, you look at the government of Israel. It was primarily corrupt. Primarily, it's not even just now. Even when they followed the Old Testament law, they were most of the time disciplined by God. And the prophets that came there were not, most of them were not bringing good news to them. They were judgment prophets. So that's not nothing new. It's nothing new. So to equate people of God with moral behavior or Christian like behavior, it's never been there. It's never been like that ever. So yes, they are totally, they murdered the Messiah, they killed Jesus, but at the same time, we know that God makes choices based on his sovereign will. He didn't choose them to begin with because they're so good. Like that's what David is saying when God is giving him promise. He's like, "Why would you choose me? I'm deserving." There's nothing that made God choose them except his sovereign will, and to display his character through these people. But at the same time, we understand, I believe, that God's promises don't fail, and if he gives them promises, he's going to fulfill them. And I always come back to Romans 11, 11, 25, 26, 27, where it says, partial hardening has come upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, and then all Israel will be saved. So it's a time of Gentiles right now. Gentiles is the plan A for God right now. At the same time, it doesn't mean we support everything the government does. In fact, we should be very skeptical, I believe, based on their history, biblical history. But at the same time, we understand that God has a special plan for them, and we're not ethnic Israel. We were not the ones whom God was giving promises in the Old Testament in the full sense. Yes, we have been grafted in, and we are now partakers of those promises, but we're not the first hand recipients. And that's where I stand, at least. And I'm glad there is more and more Jews who are realizing that Christ is that Messiah, who are coming to a saving faith, and who then become a lot of times persecuted by their own friends and family inside Israel, because there is a real persecution of Christians inside Israel. There's many stories, maybe not for not if you are an American traveling there, but if you are a local Christian who lives there, oh, there's so many stories being spit upon, thrown rocks upon, protests, beatings, and all of that stuff. Local churches. Anyway, I think it was just helpful to make some of those comments, especially in light of what's going on right now. There needs to be a balanced approach, and we as Christians need to exercise discernment more than anything.
Yeah, for sure. And that's really kind of coming back to um, being wise in what you consume
Yeah.
in the media and social media, and also walking humbly with your God. I just think that those two things can lead to a great change internally. And We can also be grateful that, and we talked a little bit about the roofing industry, and I've been saying this for a few years now. For whatever reason, it feels like God has his hand on the roofing industry
Mm,
and there's so many believers that
yeah.
I come across, daily. And there's a contractor fellowship call that's been
Mm,
going on for years and years on
yeah.
Wednesday mornings, and it's one of those things that I believe that God is taking some very simple people and creating something great, and He's purposing something great for us, and it's kind of cool to be a part of, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's go back to your story. You said you're non-denominational in the true sense of the word until you are Lutheran again. So, what brought you to Lutheranism back? Like, is that just how you feel that's the closest structure that closest to the Bible? What brought you there?
Um, so I was at an evangelical free church for about almost 15 years. Served as both a youth pastor and as an elder on the board. And our kids were starting to get a little bit older, to where they're in school, and that church was 25 minutes approximately away from our house, and so we made the decision that we wanted to find a church home that was closer.
Hmm.
I might, again, might be a little bit strange in this belief or this behavior, but like when we choose a church, we do choose a church family in which to serve. So I've never really gone to a church because it's already doing all the things that I want it to do necessarily.
Hmm.
I go there to find a group of people to walk with Jesus with and
Mm,
to live life with and, to be authentic with. And this was the best church that fit us.
mhm.
If you were to attend it, you would have no idea that it's Lutheran. I mean,
Mm,
we
interesting.
uh we do cl- we have classes on the greater gifts. We speak in tongues. I don't personally, but the pastoral staff does. We believe in healing ministries, prayer ministries. Like you would never know it was Lutheran if I didn't tell you.
Mm,
And I like those places that shed the labels off of you.
mhm,
Um, I am following Jesus, and I really am not following people or a division or a label or a denomination. Now, I will say that I have a deep appreciation for denominations, though, however,
mhm,
because again, I think this is a design by God. You could do a disagreement if you want, but when Jesus even or anybody was going around in the synagogues pre opening up the chapters of the New Testament, and there's 400 years between the Old and New Testaments,
mhm,
and at some point during those 400 years, the Pharisees showed up. So there was this movement of, dare I say, individualization with the teaching that was happening at each of these individual synagogues. So those of you who don't know, there was a synagogue within walking distance of the entire population of Israel. So you always had some place within walking distance, which also meant that you had certain teachings, certain people, and certain things that would, and one could be a little bit different than the other. I think that there is a predisposition in the human DNA for individuality, even within the context of
yeah,
a relationship with God. And I think it was apparent in first century Judaism and the Pharisees and the different synagogues, as well as it is today. And I have an appreciation for that, a freedom of thought and a freedom of people coming up and experiencing God in their own way and writing about it, teaching about it, talking about it. But one of the things I do grieve in the United States today is the loss of the art of debate, because a lot
mm,
of these things were then debated in the town square or in the
right,
synagogue, and it was a version of bringing fire to to refine whatever thought process that is. And so, there's a process of refinement that we have kind of lost because we jump to conclusions, or we have people leaving a church, or leaving the faith because of people. That's the one thing that drives me crazy. Why? Well,
Hmm.
I had this bad experience at church and I walked away from God. And have you had a bad experience with Jesus? Like, is that what? I mean, I don't know. It's
Hmm.
more often than not, we tend to blame people
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
for our faith,
Yeah.
or we appreciate our faith because of people. And I think both of them are a little bit misdirected.
Yeah. Yeah. So, talking about the debate part of things, I want to ask you just clarifying questions because I'm not too familiar with Lutheran theology. But I do know, before we did this interview, you kind of filled out the questionnaire, and one of them was, do you believe that salvation is by grace alone through faith alone? And you said yes, absolutely. Is it common that Lutheran believe? Is it true that Lutherans believe in, I think it's called baptismal regeneration, like the baptism saves, or is that a very debatable thing within the Lutheranism itself?
I don't know that anybody, I've never heard it talked as baptism is what saves you. I've
Uh-huh.
never heard or been exposed to that in my years in the Lutheran church. I do know that there's some conflict or some tension into, when, what does baptism actually mean, and how was
Hmm.
it practiced in the New Testament? And, generally speaking, in biblical times, a lot of baptism was done family. The
Hmm.
the man gets saved, decides to get baptized, he baptized the entire family. So, I
Hmm.
mean, I think there's some level of ritual that comes with it. I don't know that I've ever heard somebody say that, you know, we better
Yeah.
baptize this baby. Now, probably in the origination, we better baptize this baby before it dies so it goes to heaven.
Hmm.
But I don't know that that's really a
Well, it sounds like
much of a
sounds like
thing
you were
today.
baptized at a mature age, and it was a believer's baptism, right? So
And then,
that to
yeah,
me,
and that was my
right?
choice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was
So
also baptized as an infant as
as an
well.
infant as well, but you kind of
Yep.
you're a rebaptizer, so you're an Anabaptist
I
in a
am,
sense.
yeah. And yeah.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
and then I can't remember, did I get baptized? So when one of the I know my son was baptized in the Nile. Or
Oh
sorry,
wow.
not in the Nile. The
Uh,
uh
Jordan.
Jordan, yeah, got baptized
Yes,
in the
yes.
Jordan,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
really similar, where John the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Baptist would have been
yeah, yeah.
baptized. But that was part of one of the things, and so to me, the entire act of baptism is a public profession of faith,
Right,
and
right,
I honestly couldn't care less how many times you get baptized. There's really
right,
nothing. I don't know. I hope
right.
I'm not. I can't imagine I'm stepping on too many toes by saying this, but I'm trying to remember if I got that. I might have. I think I did get baptized again,
Hmm.
just because,
Yeah,
listen, we're in friends, and I'm public display of my faith in Jesus, and it's a
yeah,
good thing to do.
yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's one of those things that is good to kind of talk about and maybe even debate in a healthy way. That there are theologians, solid theologians who are pedo Baptists, and some that are solid that are not. And so I always reminded, there's John MacArthur and there's R.C. Sproul, and R.C. Sproul is a pedo Baptist, right? He's a Presbyterian, a high level theologian. Love the guy, and I'm more of a John MacArthur guy. I'm a by faith type of a baptism guy. So that's why I'm more of a Reformed Baptist than anything else. But the funny thing is they're both friends, and they hang out, and they spend time together, and they've been to each other's conferences. Doesn't mean they can necessarily be in the same church, right? Because there are some practical disagreements on how to run the church, but they can absolutely be brothers in Christ. They can absolutely fellowship and fight bigger battles. Not to say that this question is not important. They did debate that also, and it's actually interesting to just listen to that debate, friendly debate about that. Maybe one day I'll do something like that with somebody who's interested. But yeah. So I guess the reason I'm asking this is to clarify what do you believe about the gospel, because the gospel is what saves. The faith in the gospel is what saves. As we read in Second Corinthians, it's not, it's nothing that is by works. We look at where is it? First Corinthians, sorry. So First Corinthians 15. That those first couple of verses, they describe kind of in a nutshell what the gospel is. Uh, there's more to it to explain and unpack, but there is definitely not less than that. What do you believe is the gospel? If you're going to preach the gospel to someone who's listening right now, maybe for the first time, maybe he was probably grew up around church, he knows about Jesus, he knows that Jesus died for the sins, all of those regular things, but what would you prefer to say? What will be your choice? Again, I'm not looking for perfection, just kind of how you understand the gospel.
Yeah, I understand the gospel as acknowledging and understanding that we're a beggar at the door of God's mercy, and
Yeah.
understanding that salvation comes through Him alone, and that um, that acknowledgement, and that's that place of acknowledgement in understanding that, um, believing that God loves you and taking an active approach as a response to that love is that salvation process, or that
Hmm.
salvation message. And one of the things that I caution, and my kids know this, that I tend to if there's a blurry line in my life when it comes theologically, is that I also understand the deep desire for humans to have an algorithm by which to explain how it is that I get to go to heaven, right? So
Hmm.
you have 8 different times that somebody at some point asked Jesus,
Hmm.
"What must I do to be saved?"
Hmm.
And he said something different 8 different times.
Hmm.
And yet our hearts long for this algorithm, A plus B equals C, all the time. And so C minus A, like, we want to have it just tell me what it is to be saved.
Right. Right.
And I purposefully and proactively resist that,
Hmm.
to where that's where it becomes my answer. Once we acknowledge we're the beggar of God's mercy, we're the door of God's mercy, and our pursuit of, or my reaction to His love. And because, like, I hear so many stories, and that's the hard part, right? Is that, you die and go to heaven, what are you going to tell, Saint Peter? Why should I let you in? And um I don't think that's the question. I don't think you're going to be asked that question. Everybody knows the
Hmm.
answer to that question. The question, and this was in the book Ragamuffin, um, do you really believe that I loved you?
Hmm.
The impact of that question is far reaching,
Hmm.
because we have so many people that work so hard at their faith, or a version of their faith, not really believing that God loves them or accepts them, that they kind of outwork, and they're not meaning to necessarily, but at the same time, they don't really believe that they're
Hmm.
saved, and they in an attempt to find a relationship with God, they actually find themselves imprisoned by some sort of theology that holds them captive,
Hmm.
and that to me is grievous.
Yeah.
um we should be able to find freedom in our relationship with God, and how He has created us to be and purposed us to be very specific to what He's planning. So,
Hmm.
I hope that's not too, not to pin it down, but at the same time,
No, I
I
think
know this. I
it's
know the Sunday school answer, and I just refuse to give it, I
right.
guess.
Right, right. I guess I want to, I do it for the sake of those who come with the baggage, right? Kind of with the lens, um, through which they interpret this, which probably most of us. Um, it seems like nobody will ever refuse God's love in their right mind. So, what is it that makes people refuse God's love then? Like, what is it? What is so? unappealing to a sinner about God's love?
I think it's really hard for people to deny themselves.
There
Seriously,
you
it's
go.
like the ego is, you know what, God, it's okay. I get it. I've got this. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't. I cannot under state how
Hmm.
much our ego gets in the way of our relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And then that's why I'm like, mm, clarifying this, because I believe some people, or maybe many people, especially in US, seems like, in my experience, because I've lived half my life here, half my life elsewhere, they've managed to marry two things that cannot be married. Yes, I accept love of Jesus, but no, I'm not gonna deny myself and follow him. And that is, to me, a dichotomy that cannot exist, because that's not an option that Jesus gave. So loving Jesus cannot mean living in sin, living your own life, and being your own Lord. Would you agree to that?
Yes, except I mean, we're getting really close back to the Pharisees again, though. So you take
Yeah.
somebody like a Jonah, who's in the
Yeah.
belly of a whale, gets spit out because he was refusing to go to Nineveh,
Yeah.
and yet when you find out what was it about Nineveh that he hated,
Right.
what was it? Do you know? Like, why didn't he want to go? He
Oh, I
didn't want
mean, they
to
were enemies of Jews. They killed so many of them.
exactly, but why
Yeah.
he didn't want to go very
Oh, because
specifically,
yeah,
he
yeah,
did
because he knew God was merciful. He was going to forgive
because
them
he
if they
knew God
repent.
was
Yeah.
merciful, right? And so as soon as we start building these things into our
Right.
minds that say, I'm here, you're there, and it's that's where I get living in sin. And again,
Yeah.
I'm reacting to that phrase that you use.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get it. I totally understand it. And there are some
Yeah.
people that are outspoken Christians in the roofing industry and in life and in my church and in uh, that are living in sin, and I don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
welcome to life, right? I mean, we put people into groups and we say, well, and you call it that or not, we start excommunicating people, we start
Right. Right. Right.
naming things
Well, let's do
and
this, because
identifying
I totally
people.
understand what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. I've been on the both sides of this myself in my life, and I've been to churches that've been on both sides of this. Churches that are free grace, do whatever you want to do, and you're saved once, and you can go and sin, do whatever you do. And there have been to churches that, hey, you have a lust in your heart, repent, or are we gonna excommunicate you right now and repent in this particular way. Like, there is extremes on both sides. I agree 100%. I just think, if we're generally gonna if we're gonna look at the landscape of churches in US, and I would say probably not the conservative movements, because they're kind of smaller pocket, like more of a fundamental churches. There's less and lesser of them, really. More and more evangelicals are becoming kind of leaning towards liberalism more and more, seems like. It seems to me that the general kind of leaning is more towards free grace type of thing, which I believe grace is free, but grace leads to obedience, versus grace gives you a license to sin, right? So that's what Paul is speaking about in Romans. Some of you will say, oh, salvation is free, so go and sin. He's like, may this never be. Like, he is using the most kind of aggressive words there in the original Greek. May this never be. How can those who've been freed from sin go back to slavery of sin again? So he's pushing back, but he's not saying no, 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 go back to the law. He's saying you're a new creation. You cannot sin if you're a new creation. And the point here is not that we cannot sin in the full sense of that. The point is, we cannot continue living in sin. We cannot love the sin. We cannot continually persisting in sin, and still call ourselves Christians, because if there is a new birth, a new heart that God gives, there's going to be new desires and new fight that's happening in our life. Now, I totally understand, the dangers of saying, hey, sin equals unsaved. I will never say that. We all sin. But would you agree with me that love of sin, continual love of sin, and continual persisting remaining in sin isn't potentially an indicator that someone has not been saved?
Yeah, well, and I think the assumption there, that you didn't say, but I think you have to assume is can I publicly see your sin?
Right.
And that's where it's difficult to say that, well, you are living in sin, and I don't know how you can call yourself a Christian. And those two phrases came out of your mouth, and I mean, I trust that you understand the heart that I'm coming to this is again
Absolutely.
in a
Yeah.
debate. As soon as you start talking in those terms, I'm seeing the sin that's secret, my skeletons in my closet that nobody knows about.
Right.
Guess what,
Right.
Dima? I am living
100%.
in sin. And yet, what makes me think that I can call myself a Christian when you are struggling with homosexuality, or you are struggling with obesity, or you are, struggling with gossiping or lying? And again, like,
Yeah.
to me, we are all living in sin. Now, I do believe that there is a responsibility for those who are attempting to bring to light. I don't know. I struggle with this, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where I appreciate this conversation. I do struggle with this when you have outspoken Christians who are living together, cohabitating when like at a very high profile. I struggle with that, and yet at the same time, like,
Yeah.
that's why Jesus came, and that's why God is. That's the Ninevite in me that's going. God is a merciful God, and He pulls people out of their life of sin
Yeah.
on a daily basis.
Well,
So
the interesting thing about Nineveh, if you remember, they repented, right? And
they
God
repented,
did
right?
show them mercy. But the interesting
Yeah,
thing is, literally 150 years later, they were destroyed by God.
yeah. Because here's the thing, right? They repented, but guess what they
Yeah.
did the next day? Because that's what happened. That makes humanity. I'm willing to bet they repented. God spared them, and I mean, shoot, it took the Israelites 3 days before they were making a golden calf after they were led out of uh,
Right.
the
Right.
Egypt by a pillar of fire. So, like, it
Yeah.
doesn't take long
Well,
to find your sinfulness
yeah.
again. So you're not finding yourself in a place of perfection where
Right.
now we can call you a Christian again
Right. Right.
because
Right.
you've
Right.
stopped your life of sinlessness. Like,
Right.
there's a tension there, to be
Right. Yeah,
sure.
I think you're right for sure. I don't know if they went back to their idols next day, but I would definitely say their kids did or their grandkids did. And we see through Amos, for example, like God destroying the nation because they're back to their idolatry, even though their grandparents repented and God saved them and prolonged that grace period. But that's why I said the word love sin and not necessarily sinning.
That's
You know,
true.
we
Yeah. Yeah.
we don't. I'm not saying Christians don't sin. That would be a heresy. That's against what First John is speaking. Like literally, first book of John is all about that topic. And I encourage anyone who's like struggling with this question, and which is all of us, to read that book like twice a day, and three times on Sunday, because it just provides a very healthy balance of, no, you say you don't sin, you're a liar. But if you love sin and remain in sin, that's like literally the word that John is using, then you don't know the truth, then you are not his. So it's like there is that tension, but I think the difference there is that word remain that is connected to John's use of word love. Do not love the world nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So like, can you be in a sinful relationship that long that you're saying I'm still struggling with it when maybe you're just loving it, and that's where. But at the same time, I can say, can you be hooked on porn, right, and loving it but living an externally righteous life? You're in the same boat. You're in the same
Yeah.
boat of that danger that Jesus describes of potentially claiming to be his disciple but never being his disciple.
I love you brought up Amos. Amos was one of my favorite Old Testament books. I got too many. There's a lot of good favorites, but you think about it, what he was talking about, the plumb line, and you think about what a plumb line does, how it works, and and when in the book of Amos talks about that, and if you think about it, like the plumb line is something that's typically hanging from a string, and it is your kind of your compass, your due north, and if it moves, your life is it's out of balance. Your life is out of balance. Like you got to bring, there's a process to bring it into right relationship, and that's really what you're getting at there is,
Yeah.
listen, if you have a consistency that's out of plumb, it's not the plumb line's fault.
Yeah.
It's probably your fault. You've probably
Right.
got something skewed. So I do
Yeah.
appreciate that part of it as well,
Yeah.
because you can't live it both ways. I mean, if that plumb line is off, it's not the plumb line's fault.
Right. Right. And I think Bible wants us to have confidence. Jesus wants us to have confidence that we're his. And the only way to have confidence that we're his is if we can see the fruit of the spirit. And the fruit of the spirit is winning over sin. I'm not saying perfection, I'm saying direction. There are battles that you can point to and say, I was that and now I'm not.
Yeah.
I love this and now I'm not. God is working in me. And then that's why, Second Corinthians, he's saying 13, examine yourself to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourself. Like there is that push. Hey, you want to have that confidence. And the only way you can have that is if you have a track record of following Jesus, repenting and winning, but also repenting over things that you're struggling with. But I would argue that even the fight with sin is an evidence a lot of times of your salvation, because the person who can care less about it, that's a dead giveaway. He doesn't care about righteousness or God or his kingdom at all. So even the desire to pursue it, even imperfectly, is a sign itself that probably Holy Spirit is working in you. Hey, we don't have too much time left, and I would like spend hours talking with you, but I want you to talk to me about how your faith, Mike, is impacting your business. What is it that the Christianity has done and changed and shaped about the way that you run your business, your company, and maybe your ethics inside the company?
Yeah, I mean, and I go back to Micah 6:8. I do
Mhm.
everything that I can every single day, whether it's my faith, my family, or the business. I'm going to do the things to the best of my ability that are right. I'm going to love mercy. If somebody wrongs us, like we have built our culture inside of Roofle based on conflicts and conflicts resolved,
Mhm.
authenticity in that process, understanding that we're not going to. Um, devalue somebody for bringing up an issue, and we always come out stronger on the other end. So we are growing very, very fast, which means we're adding people continuously to our team. And I know a lot of businesses, when we start talking about culture, it becomes almost a cliche. But we refuse to call it a cliche. We also refuse to believe that Roofle even has a culture. We
Mhm.
Roofle is a stack of papers in a someplace in Delaware, I believe. We are a community of people who become the culture, and everything that I do personally for the business still runs through the filter of how I believe my relationship with God is, and
Yeah,
do everything that I can to model that every
yeah,
day as one of the leaders on leadership of Roofle.
yeah. That's awesome. Do you have you ever been in a situation in your company? Maybe not. Maybe you didn't have to, but maybe you had a point where you had to make a hard decision that was maybe not necessarily profitable, but it was faith-based decision, like based on your convictions from the Bible. Maybe it cost you something to stick to your convictions, biblical convictions. Maybe you weren't in that position yet, or maybe God will spare you from that.
Yeah, I mean, and so there's a couple of things. I mean, you know me, I live on the road. I mean, I'm at every event. We're going to be at probably
Yeah.
about 80 events this year, and
Oh
you know,
my
there's a
goodness.
culture. There's
Crazy.
a
Are you still
there's
married?
I mean, married 5 kids, but that's a whole nother story, right? Because I'm not going to pretend like, I mean, it's 29, it'll be 29 years in February, married to the same woman. But I'm telling you, like, we
Mm.
are working harder on our marriage today than we were 15 years ago.
Oh,
Like,
you
like
bet.
it's hard. Marriage is hard.
Oh yeah.
It's rewarding. You know, kids are rewarding. Everything is rewarding. But like, I'm not going to pretend like,
Yeah.
you know, things are
No,
things are
it's like
glorious
I
all
cannot
the time.
imagine this. I cannot imagine this life, to be honest. I actually feel bad for you a little bit. It's
Yeah,
hard.
you're welcome to. You're welcome to.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you know, there's maybe a life together covenant that I hold, you know, that is in effect both on the road as it is at home.
Mm.
And does that cost me business? I don't know. Maybe if I'm not out, you know, drinking at the 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning with the guys. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of business that can be done. Now, you could also say, there's a lot of trouble that can be done, and
Right.
so, you know, I don't know,
Right.
but yeah,
Has been done
yeah,
too.
there's
Yeah.
yeah, that has been done too. So,
Hmm.
you know, that life together covenant that
Hmm.
I have with my wife and my family, I
So,
think is still important.
so you're trying to protect that. Sounds like whenever you're traveling at these events, you're very mindful about protecting that covenant because, man, it's so easy to undermine that and put yourself in situations that will, that are very uh, tricky, and
Yeah.
potentially can lead you to sin and to some major sin, and it has happened many times. So, do you have some kind of a, I don't know, personal code that you follow, like for yourself? I'm not saying it has to be everyone's or a legalistic thing, but like to, practical things that you put in place.
Practical things, you know, not real. I mean, I haven't like
Mm,
abstained from alcohol, but I don't really like alcohol. So I mean, I'll have more, you know,
yeah.
moderation. Um, I mean,
You
I don't,
mentioned
yeah,
you
that's hard
at
to
the very least
define.
you said, you mentioned you don't like to stay past 12, right, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, my mom used to tell me all the time, nothing good happens after 1 a.m. So I've
Right,
always 1 a.m. has always kind of been in my I'm
right,
never gonna
right.
that's just not
Listen,
something I do. So
if you have kids, you know that that's true.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
once they get tired, things come out, and even about yourself, that,
yeah,
because when you're
yeah,
tired, I mean, most fights in families, at least in my family, anytime we had conflict with my wife, it had to do a lot with wrong timing and us being tired and us not, and us not being in the right or in the most fit spiritual shape, which is a lot of times is tied to your physical state as
yeah,
well. So,
yeah,
um, yeah.
yeah. I have to run. I have to go to the airport. So
Oh,
very
awesome.
fitting end to this,
Yes,
but
absolutely,
yeah,
Mike. Thank you so much for your time, and drive or fly safe. And this was awesome. I love it. Maybe we should do another one sometime in the future. But I appreciate your time, brother, and looking forward to meeting with you next time.
yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Mike. Bye.
Bye.